Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and today we are back from our long synthesis hiatus and we are talking Legion. With Legion about to drop in just a few short hours, I thought I'd go out there and give you guys my plan for making currency this league early on and going after that even more coveted Headhunter belt. So I've got a few things to share with you guys, a few things that I haven't seen mentioned, and a few Atlas things that I really want to point out, which might help a lot of you guys get ahead of the curve and make like a lot of currency really easily early. So let's get straight into it. First of all, I just wanted to give my overall opinion on the new league, and I think it is amazing. I think it's going to be one of their best yet. It's like better Breach. If you're a speed clear fan, this is a league designed specifically for you. With over 300 additional monsters per map, it completely changes how you assess all the maps in the game, and we'll be talking about that a little bit coming up. Another really important thing to notice is that it adds a new unique currency to the maps, which is the Legion Splinters, and it also just has a bunch of other currency items that drop out of it as well, which is pretty damn cool in my opinion. It adds a lot of flavor and a lot of unique things, which really remind me a lot of Breach and Abyss, which were two of the most lucrative leagues to run as a mapper. So very, very exciting. So let's move on to the next part. I think one of the biggest things to consider as a player looking to make currency in Legion is the state of the economy. And in PoE, that is one of the major things that you need to consider. So in past leagues, the most recent leagues, it's been all about energy shield, spell casting, and those are the items which you really wanted to seek. So that by its nature makes certain activities such as farming like a presence of Chayula, Winter's Orb gear like the Halcyon from Breach, the Tool Breach, all that kind of stuff. It kind of skews what is profitable, and if you can get ahead of that trend, you can make a absolute ton of currency. And what I'm going to kind of point out here is hopefully giving you guys information to do that again. So in Legion, everything is going to be about melee. And after looking at all the changes, I don't think it's just going to be melee specifically. I think it's going to be mainly swords. Because of all of the insane sword and crit multi, all that kind of nodes on the tree and the buffs everywhere. More specifically, I think one weapon in particular is going to be extremely popular, and that is Starforge. So we're not boss killers ourselves, but people who farm up Starforge need absolutely truckloads of Guardian maps, and whoever can supply those boss killers with the Guardian maps is going to make an absolute killing. And that is what I plan to do. I plan to supply all the Guardian maps to all of those boss killers and hopefully make a ton of currency doing it. So we'll go into how we're going to best effectively do that coming up. But I think Guardian maps should stay fairly inflated for a number of reasons. The first, of course, is being Starforge. I think that'll maintain multiple exalt price for the whole league. Next up will be the actual nerfing of drop rates of two very powerful items, the Eternity Shroud and the very popular Solstice Vigil. So both of those items got their drop rates nerfed, and they're both from Shaper. So that's like a triple whammy buff to Shaper drop table, which is completely insane. And we're going to see probably Guardian prices move and shift because of that, making certain activities like farming Guardian maps much more lucrative. So that's the economy side of things. Obviously, if you're a crafter, there's a lot of other opportunities to be had, like a lot of jewels, I'm sure will be available and all that kind of stuff, but we're focusing mainly on mapping here. So that's the economy side of things. Next up, I'm going to cover what my Atlas plan is for 3.7. So normally I go into a lot more detail about my plans for the Atlas. I'll try and min-max the Atlas and all that kind of stuff. But lately, it just really has not been necessary, unfortunately. Ever since GGG implemented a algorithm which randomizes the Atlas by itself and makes sure every map has 5 sextants available on it, it's not really too important, and most maps these days are completely viable because they all have the same amount of sextants, with the only differentiating factors being how Elder Influence affects it and the different quality of sextants, whether it's reds, whites, or yellows. So Most of the time you will favor white maps just for those white sections and the lower prices, but some things may be shifting there as well. So let's get straight into it. What is my strategy? So in 3.7, I plan to do a T16 Zana strategy. Now there's a few reasons for this, one of which is just that I am fairly fed up as a player of doing maintenance. So we're talking about having to worry about sustain, worrying about putting all of the quantity, everything on there, making sure you have stuff like Monster's Treasure, Bountiful Traps, all that kind of stuff for when certain sextant modifiers show up. I'm just kind of tired of that. I don't like using scarabs when I have to buy them one by one. So I wanted a low maintenance strategy, and T16 Zana is as low maintenance as you want it to be. Obviously, the more you invest, the more currency you'll make, but you don't need to invest because you can just use your chaos as a buffer for your map pool. And with the inflated Guardian prices, you shouldn't have any problem floating multiple thousands of chaos once you really get into the swing of things with really good gear. So that's my thinking there. So with the new Legion mechanic though, we're going to see the map meta change somewhat in my opinion. So a lot of the time, the average map has around 450 to around 750 monsters in it. Some go above that like Underground Sea and Bazaar, and some go below that like Strand, but generally that's the kind of range we see. I think it's really important to note that if we're adding an additional 300 monsters in every single map, potentially, according to Chris Wilson, that really does change just how big the advantages are between these maps. It changes like 50% difference on mobs between like a city square and like an Underground Sea, maybe sometimes, to like a much lower, like 20 or 30%, which makes it potentially now a decision of which one you want to do. You can actually look at the trade-off of clearing that map faster or having more monsters per map you put in. So it now becomes very interesting to decide. And I think with the addition of the masters in every map, with the Legion being, in my opinion, looking to be so lucrative, with Sextants adding a flat amount of monsters as well, I think it's almost to the point, or it is at the point, where the scales have been tipped, and it's now all about how fast you can clear a map and not about how many monsters are in it, because you just have so many monsters in the map from external sources that it just doesn't matter anymore. So I think we are at that point, and I have a few maps that I want to point out, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about how we're going to be running T16 Zana. So in my opinion, the maps which really stand out for me, I've tested all these, and that you can realistically get a 1 minute-ish clear with the army, or maybe a little bit slower, obviously depending on your build and your gear level, are the following. So some of these obviously will be slower than others, but I think one of the best maps for Legion will be Ashenwood. This is probably one of the smallest, if not the smallest, map zone in the entire game, and cramming all of those sextant monsters, breach, everything in there, the army, it's just so dense, it's completely ridiculous. On top of that, the boss is very easy to kill and doesn't do much damage to you, so it's a very amazing map. I'll quickly rattle off the rest here because I'm sure a lot of them do look familiar. We've got Arid Lake. This one's a bigger map, but we want to have as many of these as possible, and I'll go into why in a second. City Square obviously is a no-brainer. Beach, again, a very popular small tile set. Tropical Island with practice and the correct build, so something like Tornado Shot or Winter's Orb can run this without zigzagging, and you can just go straight forward, making it one of the fastest maps in the game. Leyline is okay, Mesa is also okay, and then we have Glacier here, which in my opinion is actually quite good, and the reason for that is that the goats at the end boss actually do have a higher chance to drop maps, similar to Desert Spring, so you can actually get quite a lot of maps from that boss as a result, and I'd say it probably is quite effective. So obviously these maps are all white maps, and the reason we have so many listed here and we're not just choosing to run one is because of one of the flaws of running a Zana-based strategy. So the main bottleneck of running this strategy is having enough white maps to obviously alch and then put in the device, because you're not sustaining maps, you're selling all of the Guardian maps that you get to drop. So it's kind of like you need to buy the maps and you need to sell the maps. But you can almost get to the point where you can sustain based on white map drops. Obviously it will get easier as you add more maps into your potential run pool here. The more maps you have, the easier it will be to sustain, and the more options you will have when you're buying stocks of maps. So trying to like put all the layouts in here that you like is going to be very effective. So I will be buying and trying to acquire all these maps at the league start and building up a huge bank, and then I'm just going to try and smash out all of these Zana 16s as fast as I can with all full sextants, chisels, and fragments. I think that's going to be about it, and prophecies. And then I'm just going to dump all those Guardian maps into the economy, and then I'm going to reinvest all that chaos in and then dump it again, because I just think there's going to be such a high demand for Guardian maps. So the upshot is, smaller maps in my opinion are going to be better because of the additional monsters from the army on top of stuff like Abyss and Breach, and we want to run them as fast as possible to really exploit the fact that we get so many free monsters in those maps. Moving on, I do have a few other things I want to chat about here, and that is incubators, the new divination cards, and army boss farming. So the first up, I think incubators are going to be extremely powerful from what we've seen so far. I cannot confirm, but just by looking at the names of the loot filter information, it looks like we will have a map one, we will have a scarab one, and today we saw that there is a 6th link armor scarab as well, which is quite cool. So I think these are going to be super lucrative. I think it's going to be worth buying like max of them and putting them on all your gear, especially if you're generating things like maps and scarabs. Buying them from other players, in my opinion, will be worth it if you can get them for the right price, but I think you will just be getting a lot of these anyway if you're just running Zana maps over and over and over again, or any map for that matter, especially if you're running a build that can just hit all of the army mobs. So very, very important, and I'll be definitely min-maxing those a little bit more into the league. It's something I'm really interested in doing. Next up, we have the new divination cards. Obviously, my strategy is not going to be a magic find one. Obviously, you need a lot of damage and specific items, sometimes like Sibyl's Lament, to be able to do reflect maps like in Zana. So I will not be using magic find, but new divination cards definitely do play a role in how you can make currency. This time I'm not going magic find though, so that will be on a later kind of to-do list. I might check those out later, but this is the league which I've seen the most kind of tier 1 divination cards added ever. There's stuff like Farrell's Fur, the Exalt card, the Soulfight Scarab card. There's just so many new good divination cards. If they drop in any one specific map, you betcha it will be run, and it'll be really, really interesting to see. Next up here, one that I really do think will be really good is army boss farming. And not just army boss farming, I think if the monsters do indeed drop loot how I think they will, it'll be worth getting in full 6-man army groups and potentially even doing rotors for those army groups. Just because, I mean, I'm picturing 300 mobs in a map, and then I'm picturing 5 armies coming at each other. That's 150 mobs per army. That's a lot of monsters. And you can probably get people in just because they want the experience, and you could potentially get an insane amount of currency, experience, all that kind of stuff from chain running these things. So army boss rotations might be a thing, could be really interesting to see, and that is something I will be trying out. So as always, guys, I'll be doing my daily updates when I can get around to it. They're generally a day after, so I'll play all day and then I'll release my update. The website will be updated for those of you who do use my loot filter. It will always be updated, so you guys can check that out when it goes live. And I'll see you guys in the next video, and hopefully we can make a ton of currency this league as a team.